your turn.
Okay, I'll start share my screen in that case. If there's any issues with it, please do let me know. Yeah, I'm not really one for PowerPoint type presentations, but I have prepared a few slides to lean in with, and then don't worry, not too many slides, and then we'll just go over to a PBIX and start doing some fun stuff. So yes, this is a session about buttons and bookmarks, as this very large bit of text says here. I am Ben Ferry. So we'll start with a little bit about me, but not too much, because that's not what you're here for. Basically, I have been working with Power BI since very, very late 2016. So we'll call it 2017. And yeah, I was kind of working with Excel and not happy with the way things were, which led me to Power Query, which was fantastic, and then led me to Power BI. And I was working then at a company called BASF, which is like a German chemical company. I worked there for a few years with Power BI. And now I'm at an online optician still in Berlin, Germany. And my free time, I create occasional YouTube videos, and I also do like live Power BI chats every Thursdays and stuff. So a little bit of a plug there for myself. I do apologize, but that's what it is. So getting to the point, why buttons and bookmarks? I think I kind of tweeted this out a little bit before, but basically, why do I like buttons and bookmarks? I think they allow a great amount of flexibility in your reports. I'm sure a lot of you who are in this session have already used buttons and bookmarks. I mean, they're quite visible. So what I also enjoy doing is trying to do new and interesting things with them. A lot of the things that I do with Power BI isn't like standard business reporting. I try to think of like different uses for them, and we'll touch on these things today. Yeah, you can also create like workarounds that are sometimes not possible without buttons and bookmarks, or a lot harder without buttons and bookmarks. And finally, I do think they are very, very fun. You can do weird stuff with them, and for me, weird is fun, and that's the kind of the things that I like to focus on with Power BI when I'm not dealing with standard net sales type requests. So a lot of what we deal with in Power BI, we have best practices. The classic would be, use a star schema. This is a classic best practice that everyone should and does tend to abide by. But with this topic of buttons and bookmarks, there's less. So there's not really any best practices other than the standard, visual best practices that you kind of stick to regarding, colors to make sure things are visible, readable, all that type of stuff. So you're not really held back by many best practices, in my opinion, with buttons and bookmarks. Main uses. Now, Catherine, I believe, actually posted something about this on LinkedIn the other day. So the main uses are standard slices, and we're going to dive into all of these things as we go along, of course. Standard slices, navigation throughout your report, and also increasing user experience, which is a very general term. And actually, the first two, standard slices and navigation, fit into user experience, but we'll kind of separate those out as we go. Advantages. So more choice for your visual elements. You can really add clarity to your reports, and you can move away from standard Power BI elements. I'll, of course, clarify what I mean by that, but that is, for me, one of my favorite ones. Drawbacks. I tried to think of three things. I really did try, but I could only think of two. I'm not being biased, maybe just a little bit. So if any point during this demonstration someone thinks of a third drawback, please feel free to shout it out or type it down, and I can add it later. But yes, they can be difficult to set up. They can be a little bit confusing during your build, but with the perseverance, I think they're very much worth it. So they're not really very easy to use, and you have to be careful. I mean, you can have reports that have like hundreds of bookmarks. So this is one of the drawbacks for sure. And that's it. As far as our presentation here goes, I'm done, I promise. So we can go now into a PBIX if everyone is happy with that. I apologize for sharing a photograph of my family there. So it's across here. So I have more slides, but they're kind of more for for my attention than yours. So I'll kind of refer to them as I'm going here. So we're in the PBICS now. So this data, if anyone is interested, is simply data from a football API. It's what I use for most of my playing around with data because it's very easy to access and it's a decent amount of data. But it's not really that important for what we're looking at today. So one of the first things I said was the main uses is for standard slices. Now, what I mean by that is if you have a report and you have really more than one slicer, it's sometimes quite annoying for the user to kind of come in and you say, yeah, I apply whatever. I apply a slicer here to my positions, and then I apply a slicer to whatever top 6, and then a particular team, excuse me, and I click on that. So the really basic, and for me, I would suggest pretty much the only bookmark and button that should be in any report is this sort of thing. Because now for the user to get rid of those slices, it's quite a frustrating thing to have to go to each header, if you have the header, switch it on and take them off, or to deselect it. So for that, for me, is absolutely the bookmark and the button that should be on pretty much every page of your report. Of course, everything I'm saying here is my opinion. There's no best practices, but I do think it just makes it easier. So if you disagree, of course, you feel free to disagree. But I do think it's very helpful. So what do? I have my 4 slices applied. To create a bookmark, what you're doing with the bookmark is essentially saying my report in its current state, save it. Exactly how it is. So to do that, we're going to go to View, and we're going to go to Bookmarks, and that's what we do. We have now a bookmark pane. So currently, I'll just get rid of these because they're not linked to anything. Should be gone. Currently, I only have a couple of bookmarks there, and we'll get to those later. So really now we have no bookmarks on this report. It's worth pointing out that it doesn't matter which page you are on within your report, all of the bookmarks will show up here. So if you have 5 bookmarks relevant to this page and also 5 bookmarks relevant to this page, they're all going to appear on bookmarks. So this is why it's really helpful to kind of group them together, which we'll get to in a second. Anyway, don't get ahead of ourselves. I want to create my first bookmark. All I'm going to do is go and I'm going to click on Add a Bookmark. That's it. So what this bookmark has done is stored this report or this page of this report in its current state. And you can test that really easily. If I now go, for example, I click on whatever team and I click on my bookmark, you can see it immediately removes that slice value. It's also worth pointing out that it will do the same thing for everything in your filter pane. Yeah. So it doesn't just apply to slices, it also applies to the state of the filter pane. So for example, if I then want to change this bookmark, which leads me on to my first tip, which I've written down here off screen, which you can't see, is that I would always suggest when dealing with bookmarks, if you want to change anything, you'll see you have these little these ellipses, little 3 dots here. I would suggest that you never, ever, ever use those, because if you have multiple bookmarks and you're amending one and you try to click on the ellipses and you miss it, you actually click on the bookmark and you activate it, which will get rid of any changes that you've made. It's wildly frustrating. So instead of using the ellipses, I would always suggest just right click, because there's no difference. I'll click on the ellipses there, see here, and I right click. You can see you get exactly the same options. So I would always, when working with bookmarks, right click instead of use these, because I've done it many times myself and I kind of want to cry a little bit. So what I want to do now is basically just change this bookmark. I'll first of all rename it because it's an important thing to do, and I'm going to call it No Slices. I'm very bad at typing. So I go No Slices. So now you can see basically when I click on it, again, this goes away. And also my filter pane went away because when I created this slice this bookmark, sorry, the filter pane was hidden. If I then update now, so right click and update, it'll make any changes now that I've made the report. If I update and I hide it, it now pops the filter pane back out again. So that's an important thing to notice. For me, it's not a particularly big issue because I always hide the filter pane. And why I do that is a completely different story. I'm just not a big fan of the filter pane. That might be a controversial opinion, but it just means when the report is published, it's not an issue. However, when I'm actually in the PBICS, it's still going to pop in and out all the time. So these are all things to consider. That's not just what's on the page, but also within your filter pane as well. So I'm going to click this back in, and I'm going to update my slicer. So now basically we've created a really standard slicer. So no matter what anyone has clicked on within the report, if I then go on no slices, it's going to take it back to its current state. I think that's a really, really important thing to do because I know it's very annoying to have to continually click stuff off again. What you can also do regarding creating a standard slicer is not remove the standard slicer, but also apply standard slicers. So an example of this would be if you have a department within whatever company you may be working for, and you know that there are certain departments that when they access this report, certainly if you have reports that are used across, multiple departments in your company, you might know for a fact that the first thing that certain departments do is that they need to slice particular values in order for this report to be relevant to them, because it's just data that they don't need. So they always go and they set certain slices. So consider this as some kind of important business data. And I know that, there is a department called mid-table who only deal with whatever, forwards. There you go. Create that also within a bookmark. So if I went to add that as a bookmark and I renamed it and I would call it what I say called department mid. So now again, this one is removing the slices, but this one is applying particular slices. So when I create that in a button, all my user has to do in that case is to click on the button rather than apply 1 to however many number of slices, which might seem like it's a small thing, but if you have a person or people who are having to apply multiple slices, so 3, 4 slices before they do any work, you can also do that, kind of save them some time. It's a small thing, but I think it really helps in regards to the usability of the reports. The bookmarks, but obviously when you publish the report, the users don't have access to this bookmarks pane. You have to assign something to the bookmarks in order for them to be used. So for that, this is where the buttons part comes in. Excuse me 1 second, I'm gonna have a sip of water here. So we need to allow the users to click on something in order to activate these bookmarks, yeah? So for that, we're going to go insert. We actually have 2 options here. I said buttons and bookmarks, but I'm going to be sneaky. I'm going to sneak in buttons, bookmarks, and also shapes. Because shapes can also be used for the same purpose. Because shapes, if I insert a shape now, doesn't matter what shape it is, let's call it this one. A bit large and excessive, but okay. If I insert this shape, you can also see it has some of the same options if I were to insert a button. So I click on the button. The one that we're looking for when we're dealing with bookmarks is this action thing down here. So I click on action and I go to bookmark. I can assign a bookmark. And it's exactly the same thing for a button. I can go on action and I can go on bookmark and I can then assign a bookmark to that shape rather than the button. Personal preference, to be quite honest, whatever makes you happy. I tend to prefer to use buttons because you can do a little bit more with buttons, especially with this. There's been an update recently where you can use images on buttons, which isn't something that you do particularly often, but it's something that you can do, and it's kind of fun to play around with that concept, with that possibility. But I'll show you something a bit later on where I've used shapes rather than buttons, because I was working on a completely strange, different concept which required shapes rather than buttons. Anyway, the point is, we have our bookmarks. All we need to do now is to assign a button for their use. One thing I'll also say about shapes is that when we create a shape, we can give it text, and you can write here what you want the text to be. But for the same thing for a button, you can write text, but also you can assign the state. So what this means is, if I have my button here, and I'm just going to call this the remove slices. So by default, it'll say remove slices. But what I can also say is, when I actually hover over this button, I can just change that a little bit. So click here to remove slices. So now when I hover over, it changes the text. So it gives the user a bit more information of what's happening with this button. You can't do that with a shape. Another reason why I kind of stick to buttons, but I want to tell you that you can do that with shapes as well, because there are some benefits to that sometimes. So basically, I now have my button, and you can do different things with them. I kind of don't like this outline. It's a bit weird, whatever. Make them look how you want to look with your very standard formatting options. You can have your fill, your outline. This can also be conditionally formatted with the fill as well. This is stuff that I won't go into. This is standard formatting stuff. And I want to assign it an action. So I'm going to bookmark like we did before. So action, change it to bookmark. And then I'm going to go from none, and I'm going to go to no slices. That means it's now when I click on it, it's going to remove this and this. When I'm in my PBIX, I need to click on Steuerung, Control, excuse me. So here and here, or whatever. When I'm in my PBIX, I have to click on Control to activate it. When it's a publish, you can just click as a normal click, like most other things in Power BI. So that is basically how I would be using my my standard slicer options within this buttons and bookmarks topic. Obviously, deciding where these buttons go is very much up to the report that you're designing. In general, I like to keep them alongside the slices, obviously, because you're kind of changing sliced values with them. So for me, it makes sense that they all kind of go together on whatever side of the page you're having your slices on. And we do the same thing. So if I have two bookmarks, I can just copy and paste it. And then I can say for this one, I'm going to say no slices. I'm going to say department mid. And then, of course, I would change the text based on what that slice is going to do. And then it would work. Obviously, I've changed the hover as well. So this one is going to apply these slices, and this one is going to remove these slices. So already, I think in general, removing clicks is always a good thing for the user. I had an app update recently where I had to click on something twice, where I used to have to click on it once, which is like not a big deal at all. But when you have to do it many, many times, it's kind of frustrating. I used to be able to do it with one. So I think it's nice to offer that to the user when possible, as long as you know what the actions of your user groups are. Cool. If there's any questions, everyone that say something, just of course, let me know, and I shall get your question or whatever. So that's for your standard slices. That's pretty much it. I don't want to spend too much time on that because it's pretty much self-explanatory as to what the benefit of that is. The next thing is pretty much down the same vein, and that's basically you could use your buttons also to navigate throughout your report. Now, again, this is quite a personal choice thing. I do not like having the users having to actually click on the tabs on a report, be it where the tabs are down here along the bottom, or obviously, of course, when you have it within a workspace, you have the option to click this pop out along the side. And doesn't matter where the buttons are for me, as long as the buttons actually aren't within the body of my report, I sometimes get the impression it makes the user feel a little bit disconnected, and it's nice if you're looking at a page that everything that you need is on that page. The downside of that, of course, is I know space on a report page is sometimes very required for other stuff. So of course, if it's going to really make your page look very, very messy, refrain from doing that. But to be honest, I always try my best to find a way to get in navigation buttons. Navigation buttons now are a lot easier than they used to be, in the fact that you used to have a bookmark for every single page of your report, which is not required anymore, which is a wonderful thing because that was very annoying. Now to create a navigational button, nice and straightforward. All you got to do is click on your buttons and you're going to go. I tend to use blank for whatever I'm doing, because even if it says left arrow, if you choose blank, you can quite easily turn it into a left arrow. So I tend to just go with blank, no matter what it is. Even if it's a back button, I'll go for blank. I'll show you that. So I've clicked on blank, but if I want to turn it into something else, I can just switch on an icon. So now, even though I selected blank, it has an arrow on it. So I don't know. I tend to default it to a blank button and then do what I want with it a bit later. Anyway, the point is, if I want to have a button on my report that allows me to navigate to a second page, all I really have to do is create that button, switch on my action, and then say page navigation. And once you select page navigation, it'll ask you which destination you want on your report. So I'll say page 2. Put the button where you're going to put it, and of course, make it look nice and pretty as you're going to do and fit in with the rest of the theme of your report. Again, switching off the elements that I don't like. There is a planned update for navigational buttons, which sounds totally awesome, and I'm very, very excited for it, because I'm a person who likes buttons. It's basically they're going to have some kind of pane that if you activate it, it automatically gives you a button from every page of your report. Just kind of appears there, whatever. It was announced back in May. It doesn't exist yet, but it will appear at some point, and I'm very kind of excited for that to appear, because I think it'll make the process even easier than it currently is. So I have my button here, and again I can just put text on it, and I can just so go to page. Obviously I would have my pages, give them nicer names rather than page 2, etc. But you get my point. And then when I hover over, it would say click here to go to page 2, that sort of thing. If you want to kind of make your buttons stand out when they're for page navigation, you can do something along the lines of, so have a button here, just say I've created, I've activated the button there. If I have my 2 buttons, one for one page, one for another page, what I would tend to do is, if I have 2 pages, 3 pages, still have a button for the page that I'm on, but have no action on it. And it would say something along the lines of go to page 1, and I would give it like a slightly different color to give the user an indication that they are currently on that page. You know what I mean? This is a bad example of what I just did there. No, because I'm doing text in the background. Here we go. So something along those lines. So one, the page that you're currently on will have a different color, so the user kind of knows where they are throughout the report. And if you want to make it stand out a little bit, so separate it from the rest of the buttons, maybe put in like a little shape. I'll give it a less annoying color in a second, bear with me. And then just kind of like send that to the back. Format, send backwards, send it back. Again, something less ugly than that, but kind of along those lines, you know, so you can kind of, the user can see that this pane that they're currently looking at is separate from the other buttons, because this is more like a navigational pane, if you will. So yeah, okay, so that's pretty unattractive, but you get my point. Create like here or somewhere on the page like a navigation section which separates it out from the rest of the buttons and the slices and what have you on that report page. I hope that makes sense. That would be like your standard way to navigate through the report. Again, I understand that this is a unnecessary element of the report, but when we look at buttons and bookmarks, we're not often looking at necessity. We're kind of looking at things that can increase the usability for the user. And generally, I've found through feedback and just through experience that this is a nice way to do that. So that would be a navigational tip. When you are creating the bookmarks, you may have already seen and counted as you're working with Power BI yourself, or maybe just as I click on the buttons here. You can also see that perhaps that, yeah, you can do stuff like this. So when you right click, you have more than your standard click that I've been doing. I've been clicking, creating a bookmark. But you also have different options. So you have data, display, current page, all visuals, and selected visuals. They all kind of allow you to do different things. And because of that, it's not just about changing values. It's not just about saving slices or navigating. It allows you to kind of create elements in the report which, either help bring the user's attention to a certain point, or, and this is what I mentioned at the very start, that I said I would kind of clarify, deactivate or not use standard elements of visualizations in Power BI. See, one of the things that I've always kind of thought was not particularly intuitive, perhaps, are these visual headers here. Now, it has become a little bit easier since they have this new tooltip, which has the drill through, which comes down, but it doesn't work on all visualizations, and it's still, for me, not completely intuitive. There's still room for improvement. And a lot of what we do, or a lot of what I do when I'm working is with Power BI is giving reports to users who they just want to see the data. Yeah, it's not their job nor their responsibility to learn about Power BI, and that's perfectly fine. There's elements of their job that I don't have to learn about. They just want to have access to data in a clean and user-friendly way. So I think sometimes with the visual headers, it can be a little bit much for them to expect them to know what's going on, because that is a way for us as report designers to add stuff to a report, but it's harder to make them see what we're doing unless we give them like a training, which, like I said, they don't have time for, or they just might have no interest in, which is very valuable. If we have an element of a report like this, so this is a basic matrix that I created, and you can see here it has two different levels. So currently I'm showing it by team and player. If I pop up a level, now it's just showing me by team, right? And this is one of the cool things for me that you can do with a button. So if I were to now click here, which expands the entire hierarchy down, and I can then also create a button. No, I create a bookmark, sorry. When I create that bookmark, if I right click, I can just remove this part here, which says data. What that means is I don't want this bookmark to have any impact on the data, yeah? And then we can check that. So if I just click there, you can see now that the data tick is gone. So what that means is if I like click a couple of slices again, and I click on this bookmark, you can see nothing happens, right? It's not changing any of my slice values. If I go to this visualization here, and I click on drill up, and then I click here my bookmark again. Oh, it didn't work. Oh my God. Oh no, it did work. Sorry, that's not true, because I've sliced Newcastle already. So now if I go back down, no, it didn't work. Made a terrible mistake. It's not working. No, sorry. I apologize. I've done this incorrectly. What I want to do instead, what I need to do is, instead of doing this, taking the display label off, sorry, I'm using the wrong part for the wrong part of the presentation. I need to keep the data part on, but instead, let's go back a few steps here. I want to look at this section here. So this section here allows me to say, okay, I want this to apply to all visuals or just selected visuals. So what this means is if I change this tick from all visuals here and I go to selected visuals, what that's going to do is it's not going to affect any other of my visualizations, rather than just the visualization that I actually have selected at that point. Yeah, so I have this visualization selected. If I right click and I go in selected visuals rather than all visuals, that means no matter what I do, this bookmark is only going to apply for this visualization, which therefore it allows me to do what I want with every other visualization, but it will have no impact on this one. So now, hope it works this time. Now, if I take a couple of values and I click on this bookmark, nervous, it worked that time. What that did was it kept the slice values here as I selected before, but it changed only what was on, thank you, Marcus, but it changed only what was on this visualization. It didn't change this slicer nor this slicer, it just changed this one. So what I can then do is I can put a button on this bookmark, and I'm just going to rename it, and I'm going to call it Expand Hierarchy. So let's call it Expand Hierarchy. And then I can take another one using exactly the same method. So I'll create the bookmark, but now again I'm going to go on Selected Visuals, and I'll call it Collapsed Hierarchy. So when I assign these two things to buttons, which I'll quickly do now, if I put these, again, this is a design feature. So depending on the report, you would put them where was relevant or where made sense to you. If I were to create these two buttons, one of which I would then say, okay, the action is going to be collapse the hierarchy, and the other one is going to be expand the hierarchy. Instead of having these visual things in the visual header, which you can switch off when you're creating your report, the user can then use these instead. So when I publish this report, I would have these switched off, and I tend to switch them off. I know it sounds like I'm really picky about what I have in my reports, and I suppose I am, to be quite honest, sometimes, not intentionally, but it is that way. I don't like the visual header, so I can instead use these two things as buttons. Of course, we give them nice text, which allows the user to know exactly what they're going to do. So I could have one button that says show teams and players, and this one to say show just teams. So when I click on them, it's going to do exactly what we want it to do, affecting nothing else on this report page other than these two things. Hope that makes sense. We got there, slight hiccup, but it worked. Wonderful. So this is where we're getting into things like the user experience, because that for me has made it, in my opinion, easier for users to use your report when they don't have a particularly deep understanding of what things do on a Power BI visualization. I think it's important to remember sometimes that basically we are creating reports for people who don't have the level of understanding, or shouldn't be expected to have that level of understanding of the tool. I mean, for a long time, people have been using Excel reports just by looking at numbers. They opened it, they close it, and they're happy. With this, because we can give them little elements to help them along the way, it's nice if we can also give them a little push in the right direction to show, okay, this is what this does, this is what this does, and just, yeah, help them. The next thing I'm going to do is actually what I kind of got stuck on the first time with the taking the tick away from data and what have you. Because what I really enjoy doing is creating what is kind of referred to as a pop-up, but it isn't really a pop-up, but it gives the illusion of a pop-up. This is something that you might have seen a couple of times when people create like a slicer pane, for example. If you have slicers that pop in and pop out, there's a guy in a YouTube video for this, and it's a nice technique. But you can also do it for different things, and what I'm talking about is this basically. For me, the purpose or the use of this can be one of two things. In this first case I'll give, is that when you're using a Power BI report, you can use it in different ways. The first way can be, I'm sitting at my desk, I'm looking at a report. No problem. Then it's pretty straightforward. Another way can be, I'm sitting with a group of people and we're talking about our metrics, we're talking about a couple of KPIs, and we have it on a beamer on a wall, which is less common these days, I understand, but it can still happen. And we want to focus on a couple of the elements on this report page. Now, again, I know to achieve this, you can kind of click on this little thing here and it pops it up. Yes, works. It's a little bit perhaps excessive to me, and also because I enjoy switching off the visual header. I'm not sure, maybe I'm making my life harder than it needs to be, but I like to do this in a different way, and I think it looks a little bit sleeker, to be quite honest, because I think that is just kind of too huge, you know, and it doesn't work particularly well for every sort of visualization, especially when you go this, you pop that out, it doesn't really create any sort of, it's not a great deal bigger or whatever. Anyway, my point is to create a pop-up. To create a pop-up, you do indeed need to get rid of the concept of changing your data slices. What I'm going to do now is basically prepare some elements on this report, which will become a pop-up. So first, I'm going to kind of create a shape. This is just my idea of how you can do it. You can do it like in lots of different ways, to be quite honest. I've used a really bright color today. I'm not sure why I did that, but let's just choose something that's a bit darker maybe, and then go like, and transparency like percent. So if I do this, and then I take this visualization, I copy and paste it, and I bring this back to here, and I want to take this visualization, make it nice and big like that. Make it huge, why not? I'm going to leave, sometimes I would kind of pull this all the way to one side, but I'm going to leave it here, and that'll become pretty apparent why I'm doing that. And then I'm going to put in, I always forget to do something, so I'll certainly make a mistake at this point here, but it's fine. Easy to be rectified. So I'm going to put a button here. I'm going to switch off the border. I have my visualization here, and I have this little background. The background is to make this kind of stand out a little bit more. Yeah. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a bookmark. Okay, add. I have another bookmark, and I'm just going to quickly call this pop up. So this time I'm going to remove my data tick. The reason for that is when I want this pop-up to be applied, I don't want to reset any slices that I've made, because it tends to be you'll be doing some analysis, you'll be looking at something and say, okay, I'll pop that up, and you don't want it to remove all the slices as well, or any filters you might have applied. So now I'm creating a bookmark that's going to allow you just to kind of see something a bit bigger. So once I've created this pop-up, we have all these elements here. What I need to do now is open a new panel here, and this is called the Selection Pane. So the Selection Pane, what this allows you to do is to decide what visualizations are visible at any point. Yeah. So if I take this thing and this thing and this thing, and I'm just going to group them together to make it easier. Group like that. Going to quickly then remove this really annoying background that comes by default, switch it off. So now I have these three things in a group, and you can see here, because now my selection pane here says group. It's called group 2. And I can just toggle that on and off. Yeah? Like that. And I'm going to quickly update my bookmark because now it's a group rather than a group of individual elements. I'll get rid of this and I'm going to create another bookmark. See, this is what I'm talking about with bookmarks. You can kind of lose track of yourself quite easily. How many bookmarks do I have? What does this bookmark do? Which is why naming conventions for the bookmarks or clear names are always good. I'm not really maybe following my own advice at this point, but it's okay. I'm going to call this one no pop-up. And this one is not going to change any data either. So I'm going to have pop-up like this, and this one's going to have no pop-up. This button, yeah, the action can be bookmark, no pop-up. Hopefully that'll work when I click on it. It indeed. And then, of course, a button to assign to create the pop-up. So if I quickly just copy and paste this button, and I'm going to assign this to a bookmark, and I'm going to assign it to pop-up, and quickly change the text, and it's going to say. Again, give them better text, all that kind of stuff. Just on hover, get rid of that. So open pop-up. So now when I click on that, it'll have this. So what's just happened right now is obviously this is now at the front of my page. So what you need to do is, when you're dealing with pop-ups, is to ensure that everything is correctly formatted. So this one, what I need to do is I'm going to go this one. I'm going to send to back and center back like that. Also, what you should be doing when you deal with pop-ups is you should be using this newish option in general settings where it says maintain layer order, which is a really weird setting because I can't think of a situation where I'd ever not wanted to maintain the layer order, but you switch it on because that means when you publish the report, the order in which you set it will remain, doesn't matter what you're kind of clicked on. Yeah. So anyway, what we have now is a situation where I've said, okay, I'm looking at some data and I want to look at something a bit closer, and I can allow my users to kind of be drawn towards that one visualization. And they still have the option, of course, to change all the slice values because the slices are still there. You can still click on them, which is one of the benefits of having a bookmark where the data isn't changed. Hope that makes sense. Can be helpful. That can also be used for other stuff. Not just bringing the user's attention. I mean, this could be, I understand, like a not so common case. I do tend to put them in the reports if I know there are certain things that are looked at more in depth. Classic example of that is if you have a report that's used by a management team, like your C levels, the CEO, that type of stuff. Because you can create a report that has like one page of data, and they're only really the C levels. They're only kind of looking at like 2 elements of that report, and they're talking about it in the group and discussing it. And they don't want to focus perhaps on other elements because again, it's a multi-department report. It's not just built for them. It's elements that they don't care about. So if you know that they're going to be looking at just those 2 elements and talking about them as why is this number good? Why is this number bad? That sort of thing. You can give them the option of focusing on those 2 visuals. I know you could do that on a separate page. I understand that. But this kind of looks cool. And again, this is nothing that's really best practice, but I think if you create these elements in your report, I do think it can kind of help sometimes with user acceptance because people are kind of drawn into not just the nice data. Of course, the data is wildly important to get our data right, but also that it's nice to use and it's kind of good fun, Cool. So that was the pop-ups. The last thing not the last thing, but another thing I want to quickly look at is drill through pages, because you don't necessarily need, as we've seen with our navigation, you don't necessarily need a bookmark to have a button that can be put to good use. So if I create, of course, another button, I'm going to put in another button. So as you can see here, I'm kind of just doing this very quickly. I'm creating a button, I'm putting it there, putting it there. There can be a limit as how many buttons you can put on one page. You want a page that's like 50% buttons. This is just, too much, right? So of course, when you're building your report, understand what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and what's important. So this is just an example of what you can do, not how your page should look, of course. So if I take this button, I go to my action, and I go drill through. Now, drill through is a really weird thing for me because it's an element that is kind of almost completely great, but not really. It's better than it used to be, again, because of this new tooltip where you hover over something and then it says drill through, and you can drill through that way. It used to be that you had to right click, which was a bit frustrating. You right click to drill through. You also have the option of a button, which for me is also help. I use it less, but it's also helpful because if you've done this on a report, you might not hover back over it because you've already done your action. You've already clicked on it to kind of create some kind of cross filtering, right? So if you use a button for that purpose, and then I got my action and my drill through, and my destination page is I have a page called DT for drill through. Not a great name, but what you're going to do. And then I click on that. It then like activates this button, which then serves as a drill through button, which is helpful because again, the user doesn't have to kind of go here, look at what they're looking at, and say, okay, I want to investigate that a little bit further. I want to go to another level. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to hover over, and then go back there, and then go here. They can just click on this button. Obviously, you need to set that up correctly. So you need to generally create it with some kind of formula-driven text. You can just create some standard text, which is click to drill through. What you can also do is create it so that it changes what it says once you've actually clicked on a value. But by default, it's quite cool because when nothing's clicked, when nothing is selected, it's kind of grayed out. Once you select something, it kind of pops up, and then you can click on it. So even if you don't go the direction of using standard like a DAX-driven formatting for the text, it's nice and straightforward, and still it's going to give the user a bit more indication that, okay, there's something going on here. I've clicked on that, but I have the option to get more data through my drill through. Not something that I use a lot. I tend to use that on my non-work-based reports, but yes, that can be helpful. So there are a few other uses that I want to look at. I'm not going to go into so much detail about the next things because it kind of get yeah, you can really take these things as far as you want to take them. I mean, for your imagination kind of becomes your only limit, which sounds a bit cheesy, but can be true to an extent. There are things that I very rarely use, and I really haven't really considered many use cases for. An example of that is you can add a bookmark, and it doesn't really affect anything on the current page. So you can create a bookmark for a page. So if I were to create a bookmark for this page, no matter what it is, I could then put a button for that bookmark on a different page. Now, an example of how that might be helpful, I think I've hopefully prepared a different version here. An example of how that potentially could be helpful, is if I create this button, I hope this works, because I forgot to check it. If I create this button, and I have a couple of slice values here. So this is, I've been using the report before. I've kind of done a bit of stuff, and I've gone through and I've clicked on some values, and I'm back on my navigation page. And I can have a button that kind of prepares that page for me to use. So if I click on this button, so it says remove all slices and pop-ups from open page, and then I click on that, I'm going to enter this page with the slices all kind of exactly how I want them to be. Now, there's not a huge use for that, so I'm really stretching here. I understand that, because you can also have a button that just links, that just goes to that page and affects the data as well, right? But it's helpful to know that you can do these things. You could also use these buttons or these types of bookmarks when you want to perhaps change the types of visualization, because as I've shown before, you can change the elements in the report. You can bring a pop-up. You can also swap out visualizations, like hide this visualization and put in a new visualization in its place. This is also a possibility. So this really is many different ways of using these bookmarks and integrate them in different ways. Yes, this is also true. One thing I'd like to say as well is also, though a bookmark can really tends to be set up just for one particular page, so you can't really have a bookmark that affects multiple pages. If you do have like a landing page here, for example, and you have on this landing page a slicer or two, because you can sync your slices across the entire report, what you could do, for example, what you can do is basically have a button that will select the slicer values, as I mentioned before. We'll select a slicer value here. So if I have a bookmark that's set up that automatically selects certain values, and by syncing my slicer, I can then sync multiple slices with multiple values across every single page of my report. So essentially, selecting any number of values I want from any number of slices, which then affect every single page across the entire report, which can be really helpful. One other thing, yeah, exactly. Also, it dynamically changed the tooltip. This is also a very good point. If you want to have a button that you have a tooltip page and you can basically change what's on the tooltip, this is also a very cool case. I also wanted to show, I'm okay for time, I hope, by the way. I'm not sure what's going on with time. If I'm running out, please let me know. There are really non-standard things you can do with bookmarks, and this is something that I just had an idea to do a while ago, and I started and I stopped because there was a very big change in I think it was like, what, 2019, a very big change in how Power BI was set up, all the visuals and stuff. I can't remember. Anyway, so what I have on my screen here is a published report, and this published report is designed to look like a PBIX. And the concept this is to help the users get a basic knowledge of how to use Power BI without actually having an initial training. So it's very basic at this point, but the gist is here. So all this here is done simply via bookmarks, and in this case, shapes, not buttons. So if I click on this thing here, it brings up a shape which has text, which tells the user what certain elements within the PBIX will do. And if you keep clicking through each element, it will then describe what things are in Power BI and how to maybe use the program a little bit better. So I click here, it says queries, use this to get data, and then here, this shows you where to build your visuals. This shows you how to then basically view your data. You can't transform data, but you can create calculated columns. Little strange smiley face because I don't like calculated columns. Model view, so it shows you what to do with your model view, and then click again. So basically it's taking you step by step through a Power BI report, a blank page, and allows the user just to kind of learn one or two things. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that buttons and bookmarks can do a huge number of things within your report. They can do from anything from the very mundane, which is to get rid of a slicer or put on standard slicer values, or you can basically come up with a concept or hide or show really multiple different things within your reports. I mean, one final thing that I kind of created. Did it work? Yeah, this sort of thing. So this is not meant to be like a completely massive plug, but it's just like an idea. So if you have a report, if you publish reports to like, I publish quite often reports, you know, in my spare time to like my website or whatever. And if you want to basically give people more information about who you are, or if you have any questions, you can just create the pop-up with this sort of thing as well. It's very, very versatile, and it's something that really, it's worth a deeper look when you're building your reports. It's easy to overlook them because they're kind of not there. You have to open the panes. You have to really understand what each element is, and they can be frustrating because you can click on the wrong thing and they can take a while. But for me, buttons and bookmarks are very, very much worth your attention when you come to the design stage of the report and you're thinking about how the user is going to interact with all the fantastic work that you've done before you get to this stage, the work that you put into your ETL and your, you know, preparing your data and creating your relationships and creating your calculations. This part kind of gives you a way to showcase and allow your users to enjoy your data in a report in a very, very nice way. That is pretty much all I had. I hope it inspired some people to kind of come up with some cool ideas, or if you haven't learned anything about the practicality of the of using buttons and bookmarks, at least like one or two ideas, you know. So thank you very much for paying attention.
Thank you, Ben.
Hope you enjoyed that.
Great session.
Thank you.
I have learned a lot. Yeah, I like the pop-up thing. I never thought about this in this case of use it to scale up visualization. Yeah, that's very great. Yeah.
I think for me, a lot of it's come from the fact that there are elements that I don't enjoy, like I said, regarding the visual headers.
Yeah.
I switched them off, and after I switched them off, I was like, I switched them off, but now people can't do things, and how can I get around that? I was like, yeah, buttons and bookmarks, that'll help. So it was maybe by necessity rather than anything else, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I looked through the chats. There are a lot of thank yous.
Yeah, but I guess we had one question. Could you share the report you showed us last with the tour through the PBX or through the Power BI desktop?
Like with the arrows going through?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a open published report, so I'll just share the link here.
Cool.
It's not finished or anything. It's just I created it this morning just to kind of. Do you know what happened, right? I created the first version of this, probably like, say, a year and a half ago. But do you remember when there was that really big change in the visual layout of Power BI?
Yeah.
I'm not joking. That happened the day after I did the first version of this, and I was so upset. I was like, this is not cool, man. So it was completely useless. So I didn't start it again since this morning. So this was my kick to get it going again.
Yeah, no, another person had the same problem, but he had more bookmark than you in your report, and he was so frustrated.
I can well imagine. I share that person's pain.
Great. So have we another question in the chat, or
no? Only
unmute self. I will stop the recording so we can chat in private.
Thank you very much for the person who brought up that you can.